Hi, I'm Jonathan Leeman.
I'm Mark Dever.
Welcome to this episode,
Pastors Talk.
Videoed episode of
Pastors Talk and Watch, I guess. Pastors walk, talk, and see. Pastors talk and listen and watch and see. And Pastors Video. That's what we are. Pastors Talk Video.
Thank you, Dr. Seuss.
Pastors Talk Video.
Walking and talking. Learn more at 9marks.org. And if you want to help
it
support
looks a little
the
different than it
ministry-
used to look.
Yeah, new website up. Fun, right?
Yeah, you and Thomas.
You did look.
You and Thomas Terry talked about it.
Because I don't think you ever even looked at our old website.
I did a PhD back before you used the internet. So I'm just used to looking at scrolls and unrolling them and things like that.
You can go to 9marks.org/talk if you want to think about supporting this ministry. I have to say, I'm told to say that.
Right. Don't be ashamed of it. Own it.
Last time, Mark, we talked about internships. We talked about your internship and how it started, what you were trying to accomplish, how it evolved over the years, why you do so much reading and writing versus, say, preaching and hospital visiting or whatever. Yeah. Right. Okay. So now you have somebody who's listened to that and he's like, oh, man, Mark, that's awesome. I want to do that. I have a heart for it. I'm not sure our church has the money. I'm not sure my elders on board. Okay, so now we want to talk to that guy. Or let's suppose we're talking to a group of guys. How do you start an internship program? That's the program for this conversation. So what's the first thing this guy should do? He's a pastor. He wants to do it. What now?
Well, you've mentioned most of the basic things you need to think about. Why are you doing it? Who would need to buy in? Will there be a certain amount of money, of your time, a certain goal you have in mind for it? Are the leaders of your church particularly behind the idea? So I think there are, you could just sit down with a piece of paper and make a number of bullet points of things that you need to think through to cover to make sure, what about this aspect, that aspect? And then when you've got all those, you feel pretty good about that, then I would pray about those things, show it to some of the other pastors or elders at your church, talk about it together and take it from there.
Let's kind of go through a few of those bullet points that are on this piece of paper, starting with what it should look like. You focus on reading, writing, developing people's ecclesiology. We talked about that last time.
Yeah.
Is that the right thing for everybody? I mean, what about the guy who says, no, Mark, I really want to have him practice preaching and going with me to visits, maybe doing a funeral and so forth.
So I take it by the examples you're giving, you mean particularly an internship that has the goal of forming pastors?
Yeah, that's right. It's a pastoral internship for that purpose.
Right. So our internship is not strictly pastoral. It's largely pastoral. The way I always put it, I'm trying to reach pastors or people who may be pastors, hope to be pastors, who I think will then influence others with understanding the church biblically. So it's not just that I'm aiming merely at people who are going to be the main teachers of a congregation, though I am mainly aiming at people who are going to be the main teachers of a congregation. But I'm not exclusively aiming at that. And that matters because if I were simply looking at preachers, that's the main thing they're going to do, I could imagine preaching having a larger component in our internship.
You'd switch it up some.
Whereas right now, we do have one paper they write where half of them read Martin Lloyd-Jones, Preaching and Preachers. A couple of them will read my book I did with Greg Gilbert called Preach. A couple of them will read David Helm's book, Expositional Preaching. And then we'll have one joint conversation on preaching with the interns, informed by their readings in those books. But they also participate in our weekly service review, where the morning and the evening sermons here at CHBC are commented on by the staff. So as one former intern put it to me, he thinks he learned more about preaching sitting in those service reviews than he did by his undergrad or his MDiv degree.
And maybe even the reading the preaching book.
Possibly,
you learn a lot from that. But
as you see the understandings applied specifically and practically,
so helpful. Yeah. Okay, but back on figuring out my purpose. I'm in a church. Oh gosh, you're making pretty fine, distinctions there, Mark. Not just the pastor, but mainly the pastor, but also any other thoughts on how I should think through what my purpose is? Like, why go for what you just said versus helping guys learn how to preach or whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
Because as you just illustrated, that's going to affect maybe the books I have them read, what I'm going to have them do. So still on that purpose question.
Yeah, I think part of it's going to be the background and disposition of that individual preacher. So Bobby Jameson, with his PhD in New Testament, is going to be probably doing more biblical papers in his internship. We do some. I, with my background in historical theology, am going to be probably doing more systematics and more historical work to help people understand the Reformation and how our public worship developed and how the history of evangelicalism has molded evangelism and therefore 9-mark stuff, conversion, the shaping of the borders of the church against the world. The concerns that really flow in the 9 marks are very much the kind of concerns that motivate our internship program.
So to some extent, you're going to take stock of yourself,
Yeah.
where you're trained.
I think you'll naturally
where
do
you're
that.
gifted.
So maybe you're not self-consciously doing that, but if you just come up with what you think is important, that's what you'll be doing.
We all kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, I have thought about the way you do your internship program. Depends heavily on your ability to execute the
You mean
Socratic.
the way one does one's an internship program?
No, the way you, Mark Dever, do it.
Yeah.
Does rely to some extent on your facility at the Socratic method.
By which you mean?
Sitting there in intern discussions, asking them questions that provoke good conversations that allow for you to sometime expose misunderstandings or contradictions or even disagreements. You do that very well.
And would you say that
expose them to themselves?
Would you say that all internship programs that are good are like that?
No, I'm not. I assume they're not, which is why. But I think you have a skill there.
Have you seen other internship programs that you think are worthwhile?
I've not sat nearly as closely. No, I've more heard about them. You know, a brother will say to us, "Yeah, I have my guys do a lot of preaching," or things like that. I just think you're very good at that. I don't assume a lot of guys are very good at that. And so in my mind, taking stock of yourself would include that sort of thing, no?
Yeah.
Any other comments on a guy discovering his own purpose, what he wants to do with it?
I think if you come up with that list on a piece of paper and then you do that with your other leaders, you'll naturally come up with those things.
Okay.
It's the things that seem significant to you. So Brian Croft working on practical shepherding as he does makes complete sense if you know Brian.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, that's what he's going to come up with.
Yeah.
And it's good that he does. It's useful. You listen to Phil Newton, talk about the kind of things Phil does. We all talk about things we know. We don't talk about things we don't know. You know, yeah.
I want to come back to that in a minute about our emphases and not.
I'm not looking to you for tips on hairstyles.
Yeah, that's wise.
Or you for me on tips on weight loss.
No, it's also what. Yeah. Okay, how do you go about figuring out what kind of guy you're going for? I'm just going for preachers. I'm just going for what? Any thoughts on finding the right guys for your internship program?
Yeah, part of it's going to be what your own congregation is like, what your ministry is like. Do people know of you outside of your congregation? Are there reasons folks at seminary know about you, or other younger guys, let's say in neighboring churches? So again, that's just going to be determined very much by the individual and what opportunities the Lord has providentially given
Environmental
them.
Resources, as it were.
That's right. Yeah.
Greg Gilbert sitting in Louisville with seminary right next to him. That's one set of resources.
That's right.
Whereas a brother in Decatur, Alabama, different set of resources.
That's right.
That's useful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm thinking about my purpose. I'm thinking about the kind of guys I have, what resources the Lord has given me. I'm availing myself of that, whatever I can. Okay, let's talk about your elders and your congregation.
Yeah.
They need to be convinced.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
If they're going to be paying for it. There are more and less financially intensive internships. So you have to decide, do you intend yours to be a part-time internship that somebody does while they have another full-time job? Or do you intend for yours to be a full-time internship where you're going to give them a place to live, take care of their expenses, maybe give them a stipend or a salary, pay for their books? And then that will involve you in a lot of money. Depending on how many interns
so
you have.
scenario one, the elder's like, hey, pastor, that seems like a great idea. We just don't have any money. Sorry, no money.
But feel free to give your time to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to structure it in a way that you still got to work somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or if you
that's
happen to be wealthy enough that you can take time off, fine.
Yeah, so it's going to be less intense. It's going to be available to more kinds of people, a broader range of people.
To what extent can it rest on the pastor's shoulders alone? Which is to say, again, scenario, elders are like, fine, but I don't know, we got a lot of other stuff we're trying to work out. You can do it if you want to. We're not sure we'd counsel it. In other words, you're not sure the elders are fully behind you. Mm-hmm. How hard do you keep pushing on this?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, probably not very hard. I mean, I'm going to tend to trust the elders.
Yeah.
You know, we face decisions all the time that are binary. You're going to go this direction or you're not. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, if 80% of your elders want to do it and 20% of them don't, you'll probably go ahead and do it. Mm-hmm. You know, if 60% of them want to do it and 40% don't, well, you can still probably go ahead and do it. Most of them, almost 2/3 of them want to. And if you're doing something good, I mean, why not do something that you could see to do? You know, if it's 50-50, well, now it's going to be something that can be more contentious in the church. And, you know, you have to think, what's the basis of the concern for the ones who are saying no? Is it that you're not going to be able to give the time to the church that you should give? Is that already a feeling in the church? So it just depends from situation to situation what the grounds of concern are.
Okay, well, that's where I want to go next. Let's suppose a number of members are saying, Pastor, you've only been a couple of years here. We feel like you could be giving more love to us, more hospital visits, more X, Y, and Z. Yeah. The elders are supportive
of the idea of an internship program in theory.
In theory, they think it's great, but there's concern among the members. You've heard it. The elders, maybe one or two have said it. The members aren't convinced. Yeah. How hard do you push? How long do you take?
Probably wouldn't push hard at that point. And probably willing to take some time to try to build more of a consensus around it.
Yeah.
I have found over the years, though, in pressing for pastor training, I'm surprised by how many people do seem to get its significance, are in support of it. Mm-hmm. It's certainly not just pastors. I'm also surprised by how many people aren't, which in our case is certainly a minority, but sometimes they're a pretty confident and vocal minority.
Mark, this is a bad idea? I mean, what?
Yeah.
And why do they say it's a bad idea?
Because this isn't a school, it's a church. Uh-huh. Yeah.
What do you say?
It depends on where that person is located. If it's a fellow elder, I have some more space to try to exhort them to be a steward of what we have, and time is short, and let's try to multiply things. If it's a member of the church, it kind of depends on, not an officer. It depends on what their spiritual state is, as best I can tell. And are there ways that we as a church are not caring for them as we should? Do they have a higher idea of how the staff should care for the church rather than the members care for each other? Yeah, there'd just be all kinds of questions I would run it through.
I think the question behind the question of how hard should you push is, how high of a priority should generally pastoral training, specifically an internship program, be for the lead pastor of a church? So if I said to you, how high of a priority is expositional preaching? You'd say
top.
Just top.
Yeah.
Okay, where on the spectrum does A, generally pastoral training, B, specifically the internship fall? Mm-hmm. How much should I care? How much do the people listening to this care about this?
Insofar as it is trying to help your church go into the next generation, it's really, really important. Insofar it's trying to help be produced more pastors than merely your own local church will use, it is still important, but not essential in the same way for the continuance of a witness where you are.
Is it okay for a pastor to say, as I heard one pastor say, yeah, I just don't think an internship program is my thing?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what they mean by that, sure, I think it's fine. An internship program is one means, not even in Scripture like that. So it's a way that you can try to see elders trained and raised up.
Would you say you get? I'm trying to think. How many of your elders, your lay elders, do you get out of the internship program?
Some, not most.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a ton.
A few.
Yeah. Most folk more end up in vocational ministry than
from the internship.
From the internship.
I'd have to go back and look, but certainly, probably most do.
Another challenge that comes up among members.
I mean, one of the best things about having an internship program like we do is it causes there to be a market for your books.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, because we read more Leeman than Dever.
6 copies of this, that, and the other every semester.
8, but yeah.
Keeping the Leeman girls clad.
We're trying.
Grateful for it. Okay, so members say, or fellow elders, I guess it would be more an objection from a fellow elder, along the lines of observation. Mm-hmm. Do we really want these guys sitting in on our elder meetings? Do we really want them sitting in on this, that, and the other? That's going to take so much of your time, and it feels like that's going to hinder our ability to have good conversations. how do you push on through that?
Well, as with so many things, you can appreciate the good concern that may be behind that. Not necessarily, but maybe behind that. In our elders meetings, we do talk about matters in a confidential way. We don't repeat what we say in those meetings. So we mean to be able to speak freely in order to access the best judgment that each other has of these various situations. So that idea of confidentiality is hugely important to the elders meeting achieving its most basic function.
You want Alberto to be able to say what he needs to say without him being concerned with what Ryan might stumble into.
And hopefully that we trust that all the elders there certainly have that kind of character, but the other people we may let sit in for at least part of the meeting will have that kind of character. So, for example, you mentioned Ryan. When the pastoral assistants, who are not elders, are sitting there watching a large part of our elders meeting, there are sometimes going to be things where they're going to be talking about me, and I'm not privy to the conversation. So I'll step out of the room when something is discussed, and I'll just make sure that Ryan and the other pastoral assistants understand they're not to talk to me about that part of the meeting. They're not to allude to it with humor. They're not to, they are to keep that confidentiality because it's the only way the brothers are going to be able to speak as they need to speak. So it's the opposite of, trying to find out, oh, hey, what'd they say? No. You understand the importance of that, and you're trying to reinforce that.
Protect it.
So we have to have that always in mind for the eldership to do its basic job. Having said that, we have found that the pastors in training that we would have watching the elders meetings have not seriously compromised the confidential function of our eldership. And therefore, while we are selective both in how we speak while they're there and in what we speak about and what we reserve for what we call executive session, where it's just the elders.
They all leave.
That's right. That is just the elders. We've been able to conduct a lot of business in front of those people who are not yet elders in a way that I think will help them to be elders. When
like
they are
service
elders.
review. I'm watching it. I'm learning a ton.
That's right.
Look at how they pray for these people. Look at how they speak with respect and concern, and the wisdom of the counsel that's given, the things that rise up out of what you think is nowhere. I thought we had that covered, and now, he's bringing all kinds of ideas that we weren't thinking. So you see how this corporate body really helps the shepherds be able to shepherd wisely. Staff. Staff under you. Maybe there's an elder or elders are concerned about, hey, Mark, that's fine. You want to do that, but I don't want the PAs sitting in on the internship discussions or the associate pastors or the assistant or whatever, because it's one thing to assign your portion, but now you're asking to have all the staff sit in there. Help us think through using paid staff to assist in an internship program.
All of you folks out there in TV land, let me tell you what Jonathan Leeman is referring to. He's referring to the fact that I actually, as the boss of the pastoral staff, require all of the associate pastors and the assistant pastors and the pastoral assistants to give 1/2 of one of their 5 office days on normal weeks to sit in the internship discussion and listen and participate in it. So that's a pretty significant ask. But if I can just give attention to Jonathan again for a moment. Jonathan, the reason I do that is because I'm trying to incorporate those brothers into the conversation. They each have an intern that they're mentoring. Most of them have read this material before. They each have an experience that's distinct from mine. They're going to have wisdom from that. So they're going to add to a richness of the stew of conversation. And the interns will ask questions and make points that these guys have not heard before. It's kind of like reading a book. So they're getting to hear a new going over of old material, a new set of issues brought, and they hear things that each other will say or that interns say. So there's just like an infinite amount of richness that's brought by that sacrifice of time. I think there's also an esprit de corps that's built as the people experience the same exciting parts, humorous parts, tender parts of conversations.
I enjoy them.
As things are exposed or revealed. They sometimes feel boring or pointless or even counterproductive, but generally they're good. And I think the brothers who are involved in them would feel that they are at least not worthless and many of them would feel it's worth the time.
Yeah. Oh,
Some of them would not.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm happy to use my authority to make sure they're there anyway.
No, I think in your situation, it works out well. With your money, answer to the money question,
Yeah.
I have money to support this or I don't. You demonstrate a certain flexibility, right?
Yeah.
Hey, look, if you don't have much, well, then do it this way. If you have a lot, then do it that way.
That's right.
Okay, well, a similar sort of question here.
And also that part of the richness that you have, like the guys tell me, even the staff will tell me they love it when I'm just talking about the Reformation. So sometimes I'll just go for 30 minutes giving background to readings.
Yeah, sure.
Which they'll go, oh, this is like free reading of a good book. Because that's kind of what my training is.
I've heard you go on rants, and it's always edifying.
So
mostly.
I know what you mean.
Edifying.
Various brothers, when there's stuff they've thought about a lot, maybe they've done work in academically, Caleb Morell's done some research in something, or, Riley's really looked into something a lot, or Deepak or Nick, or we're all benefited by the expertise that each brother brings to the conversation.
If I'm thinking of general principles and guys are trying to figure out their own internship program right now, the general principle behind involving staff would be what you just said. One, the richness that they offer, their experience they offer.
It gives them more of a stake in the internship, and the intern's more of a stake in them.
So insofar as you can, it's a general net positive to involve staff and not for it to be just your thing.
It's like a staff retreat every week.
To some extent, it's probably going to depend on the staff you have, no? Like if you got really...
I think any staff that I'm going to hire are going to be wanting to learn. Now, that doesn't mean they'll feel that's the most efficient way of learning, but they're going to be wanting to learn. And I would.
Well, you're saying they have opportunities to learn, but they're also helping the interns learn.
Certainly,
they have resources to provide.
Yeah, that would be less disputed. They would all concede that.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the whiteboard. Here we are. I'm coming to where we began.
Yeah.
Mark, I've got nothing. How much time do I spend? What do I say to my elders very concretely?
Yeah.
And then we're going to ask, okay, do I teach the church about this? How do I talk to the church about this? Heard everything you said. Sounds great. I got my list of bullet points. Okay, I want to go. How long do I talk to my elders? What do I say to them?
Well, you say to them that the Lord Jesus instructed us to pray specifically to the Lord of the harvest, that he send out laborers into the fields. The fields are white to harvest. They're ready. Workers need to be sent out. That means workers need to be raised up. That's where we come in. That's what the local church is to do. That's what we're giving ourselves to do. This is a way. It's not required in Scripture that we do it this way, but this is a way that we can contribute to that and be a part of that.
You're going to talk to them about 2 Timothy 2?
Paul's concerned not just for himself and his one generation out, Timothy, but his Timothy turning and teaching others, and particularly those who would themselves turn and teach others. So 4 generations, probably.
Hey, fellow elders, this is our responsibility.
Yeah.
Paul assigns us with this responsibility.
Yes. Well, in the Great Commission, Matthew 28, the assumption is that the church keeps going until Christ returns, until the end of the age. So that means there's an expansiveness, not just 2D geographically, but 3 or 4D as it will down through the ages.
Would you use elder meeting time to teach your elders like this?
Certainly could do.
How did you do it?
I think when we came up with the idea of the internship, we had enough guys like you do it in 1 or 2s.
Yeah, right.
That people were familiar with it, and it was a positive idea. It was not a difficult sell.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I did use a committee of members who were the kinds who tended to have ideas. None of them were elders. They crafted together really the form of the program, trellis-wise, not the content, the books, but the form, housing provided, stipend, this length of time, this many applicants, that we still use. Yeah. That was all devised by this committee.
If you have more questions on that, you can go back to the last episode where Mark and I talked about this, and we thought through some of that.
And what an episode that was.
It sure was. Okay, that's how you talk to the elders. Any additional advice for talking to members and kind of leading them into understanding these
on the
things?
elders, you just help them to realize from praying to the Lord of the harvest that he raise up workers, and that emphasis where the church, Paul writes in Romans 10, is to send. It's a verb he uses. So we have to somehow own our responsibility in this gift of elders that God gives us to raise up among us. So I think you can, in good conscience, ask your elders, brothers, what are we doing about this? We're doing preaching and membership and discipline. We're doing the regular Christian life, but are there any concerted efforts we're making to this end? I think it's a fine thing to pursue them with that.
That's helpful. Anything additional with members?
I think with the members is just as you preach on these matters, you try to make it clear that the fact that we know from Revelation 5 and 7 that the Great Commission works, that God brings the elect from all the nations home, we should never derive from that a passivity on our end, that it doesn't matter how we participate. We should participate by actively encouraging that. And a natural part of that is going to be seeing elders raise. I'm in my mid-60s. I should be replaced, and soon. So someone else has got to step into these roles, and we should be working to see those people raised up.
My wife and I were talking about that the other night, the right age to replace somebody. We can continue that later, though.
I think the inquiring minds want to know.
She was making the observation that men get a little bit more open and is like, I don't really care. I'm going to go ahead and say it as they age.
Yeah.
I might have been relating a conversation I had with you. Maybe.
Yeah.
And she's like, it does seem like guys will get a little bit more carefree.
Yeah. It's probably true.
And I'm like, that's part of the trouble, isn't it? Or at least it can do some.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think Shannon's once again wise.
That's right. So, we've had 2 conversations now about internships.
Yeah.
It's going to be some time before we come back to this topic, I think.
You think?
So this is your chance.
Yeah.
Anything else on this?
Yeah, I would just say, if you're a pastor who's watching this, listening to this, engage other pastors that you know, like, and respect in their ministries about if they have internship programs or have participated in one, and why or why not they have one or don't have one.
Yeah, that would be very useful.
Just start that conversation.
Sorry, I just thought of one more question.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to leave it alone.
Great.
Good to talk to you.
See you, brother.
For more articles, books, and podcasts, please visit ninemarks.org.